So we've been discussing transverse waves of a stretch string. So let's continue from that point onwards. One-dimensional transverse mechanical waves. The physical model of this being waves on a stretch string. Okay, so last time we had seen the general equation of such a wave is of the type y is equal to some function of kx plus or minus omega t, where the function should be continuous and twice differentiable. And further, we had seen that if the function happens to be periodic, then the wave is periodic and the medium particles are in oscillation. Whereas if the function is non-periodic, then it's a single pulse. So if the function is non-periodic, then y represents a traveling pulse. So the medium particles undergo a one-time kind of motion. So they don't undergo oscillations as such. And so therefore there is no frequency, time period or wavelength. Whereas if the function happens to be periodic, then y represents a periodic wave. And the medium particles oscillate with a definite time period equal to p divided by p divided by omega, where p is the fundamental period of the function. And of course, the wavelength is equal to p by k. The wavelength. And then we also have, in general, the wave velocity is minus or plus of omega by k. So in this case, we also have the relation that the wave speed is f lambda. Okay, so all these things are there. Now today we'll start the session by understanding reflections of a pulse at a boundary. So imagine we have a string which is now attached to a rigid boundary, like it is rigidly attached to a wall, and it is under a tension T and a linear mass density mu. So this is a stretched string. And at this point T, we have what is called a rigid boundary. Point P. Rigid because the point P cannot move. Fixed. So the displacement at the point P will be zero. So if we have a situation like this, that we have a traveling pulse which has an amplitude E like this and a V like this, where of course V is equal to square root of T by mu. Already understood that. So what happens is, so this is the first case of reflection at a boundary, in the sense that we're looking at reflection at a rigid boundary. We'll later also see another type of case. So just make a note of this section. The earlier section you have seen in the previous lecture, so no real need to note that down. Still, I'll just take you through this section once more, just go through the details. Yeah, now one thing you should also be aware here is that V is equal to square root of T by mu, the propagation velocity. This is the general equation. And here, particle velocity del y by del t, so it becomes plus or minus of omega f prime x plus minus omega t, and particle acceleration hence you can see that the function should be not only continuous but twice differentiable, because the first derivative and the second derivative have a physical meaning, so they should be continuous throughout the domain. Okay, so I'm sure all these points are clear. Now let's come back to reflection at a boundary. So take down the situation, then we'll discuss.
So what is the string?
Sorry, come again.
It is stretch string, stretch.
Didn't understand your question. Can you please repeat? Okay, now the thing is that when we are in this kind of a situation where a pulse is approaching a rigid boundary, no, it is reflection. Okay, Achha, that was the question. Okay, it is a reflection. Yeah, so let's understand this. So what happens is that in a situation like this, as the pulse approaches the boundary, boundary is at the same place in all the diagrams. It's just right. So now what will happen is as the pulse initially comes here, this is when you can see the interaction of the pulse with the boundary point starts. Okay. So in this case, where the boundary point is a rigid boundary point, you will see that as it interacts further, the pulse becomes smaller. So if this amplitude here was A naught, here we'll see that the amplitude becomes less than A naught. And at a certain stage, sorry, at a certain stage, it actually disappears. And then it appears with an inverted shape. Okay, so this is how it's going in terms of time. The next thing we'll observe is that eventually the pulse is back to the original size but like a mirror image. Okay. So we say that the reflection results in phase inversion, and also we'll understand a little bit about energy conservation also. Total mechanical energy remains conserved, but before the pulse comes in contact with the boundary point P, the total mechanical energy of the pulse is the combination of kinetic energy plus potential energy. Okay, this is elastic potential energy. But in this diagram, you can see that it is pure kinetic energy. Okay. There is potential energy. So, and then by the time you're back here, it is again kinetic energy plus potential energy. So I'll explain this point also, how it is kinetic plus potential, and then it's converting to pure kinetic and then reconverting to kinetic plus potential. But the total energy remains conserved. Yeah, Jagannath, I will show that. Let's just complete this part. Okay, Jagannath, basically you have to just hang on a second. Yeah, so this is a recap of last time's discussion, okay, about general equation of wave, and then we have come to the next section, which is reflection of a pulse at a boundary, starting with the first case of that, which we are doing right now, which is reflection at a rigid boundary. So the sequence of events when there is reflection at a rigid boundary is like this. Okay. So my diagram doesn't look very symmetric, but finally what should happen is, in the final diagram, this image that we have, this pulse that we have, it should be a perfect inversion of this pulse. Yes, I'm coming to that, Shikhar. Okay. Okay, so basically, see what is happening is now as a pulse is traveling along a string like this, regardless of whether the string is infinitely long or there's a boundary at the end, so it's going to reflect back as a result of the boundary. Regardless of that, that pulse carries mechanical energy. Okay, so for example, in a harmonic wave, there are continuous pulses one after the other, which are periodically placed with respect to each other. Okay. So there is a continuous rate at which energy is being propagated. So it has a power, the average power formula we discussed. But when you're talking about a single pulse, then it has a fixed amount of mechanical energy which it carries with it. Okay. And that fixed amount of mechanical energy also depends on the amplitude, but also depends on the wave speed. So, this is, if you take this as the y-axis and this as the x-axis, and you can see that at some x equal to x at a position like this, y is f of kx minus omega t type of term, where v is omega by k, which is square root of t by v. So now if you observe what is happening to this pulse a moment later, like a very small time interval later, it's traveled and it's become like this. So you can see that these medium particles, they are having downward velocity, and these medium particles are having upward velocity. So there is kinetic energy because the particles of the medium have del y by del t equal to a non-zero quantity at the position of the pulse. Okay. Also, another thing you can observe that the string's natural length is like this. Okay, so if there's a pulse present in the string somewhere, there is a stretching out of the string in this region. The string has got out of shape, bent out of shape. Okay. So there is stretch in the shape of the string. So there is elastic potential energy associated with it. Okay. So as this pulse is traveling, it is carrying with it. So right now all the energy is contained here. The potential energy is contained here. The kinetic energy is contained here. So there's a certain amount of mechanical energy, which is the sum of the kinetic energy plus potential energy the pulse is carrying. So after some time, when the pulse has moved from here to here, okay, that energy has also gone with it now.
So
Now,
both the stretch particles have some kinetic and potential energy.
yes, wherever the pulse is present, there is some combination of kinetic energy and potential energy, which is traveling along with the pulse. Okay. And that remains conserved as long as the shape of the pulse is not changing. And that will be true as long as there is no dissipative force in the system. So in an ideal situation, we are assuming that the pulse's shape does not, the amplitude does not decline as it propagates. Okay. But by the time the pulse reaches the boundary point, what happens is the boundary point, it does this. At the point of contact, if the pulse had gone about its natural shape, it would have gone like this one. So it's reduced the shape and size by actually applying force like this. So this is reaction force at rigid boundary. So what that reaction force does is it does zero work because the point P is at rest, but it converts potential energy to kinetic energy. So these particles are having a heavy downward velocity now. So by the time the string reaches this shape, where it's become flat, these particles are having a very strong amount of kinetic energy, so that they'll be able to change the orientation of the pulse in the downward direction. And now there's a bit of potential energy also which has come. And eventually, there's again the combination of potential energy and kinetic energy. So at this point of time, when the shape becomes flat, the energy is conserved, but it is pure kinetic energy. And that is the maximum kinetic energy. Whereas again here the energy is a combination of kinetic energy plus potential energy. Again here the energy is a combination of kinetic energy plus potential energy. So that intermediate conversion from potential to kinetic energy, so that all the energy of the pulse is converted to pure kinetic energy as the particles all go through the mean position simultaneously. That's in this diagram. That conversion of energy is done by virtue of the reaction force acting at the rigid boundary point.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, why is the kinetic energy direction changing to downwards?
Because of the direction of force acting.
Okay, so
Forces those points to come down with heavy amount of acceleration, because the point P cannot move, so there is strong reaction force,
okay.
like a collision impulse force, only it is not non-conservative, so there's no loss of energy. It's a conservative impulse.
Can you scroll up for a minute?
Yeah. This part.
Yes, sir. The right.
Yes, Jagannath, P is like the boundary point where the string is attached to the rigid wall. So it is the particle which is attached to the wall which can therefore not move. So that constitutes the rigid boundary.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is the case of reflection at a rigid boundary. Now we come to the
Sir,
second.
one second, sir.
Okay.
So back up, please.
Okay, so done with this, I hope.
Yes.
As I was saying, moving forward, the second type of reflection, which is the reflection at what we call a soft or in general flexible kind of boundary. So in this case, the physical example we can take of that is instead of the string being attached to a rigid surface, if the string is attached to something that can have a transverse displacement, which is free without any restriction. So an example of that would be that you have a smooth fixed pole kind of thing. Okay. And you now have a ring that can slip freely on that pole. So it can slip freely along the y-axis. And the thread is attached to that ring. So now the point where the thread is attached, that constitutes a flexible boundary point because that point can move about without any restriction. So if we have a pulse which approaches that point now, unlike the previous case where the boundary point cannot move at all, it's rigidly attached. Here it becomes the opposite. The boundary point can move as freely as required. There is no resistive force that is offered. So we have this situation. So the point P. So again, this is our y-axis, and this is our x-axis. So this is some kind of an equation like this. An equation, okay. So now this type of boundary point, this is a flexible or soft boundary point. So in this, what we will see is that the reflected pulse, okay, remains in the same phase. It does not undergo any phase change. So just make a note of this diagram and this heading, then we'll show the sequence of events, how that happens, and how the shape of the pulse changes as it approaches a boundary point and then reflects back. But the end result of it is that the reflected pulse is in the same phase as the incident pulse, only traveling in the opposite direction. So it doesn't look like a mirror image, it looks like exactly the same pulse, but the direction of travel has become opposite. Okay, so now the time evolution of the system as you come to the rigid boundary is something like this. Sorry, as you come to the flexible boundary, not the rigid boundary. Okay, so as the pulse approaches the boundary, initially you can see it's a symmetric pulse like this, but it starts to get more and more asymmetrical. So it goes from this kind of shape to this kind of shape because the boundary point can move freely. So it has undergone a displacement like this, time like this. So there comes a time when this happens. So if this amplitude was E naught, here this goes to 2 times E naught. So that is when the peak has become stationary. And after that, the peak starts to come down again. I mean, the boundary point starts to come down again, and the peak starts to move away. Till this point, it is still moving towards. And this is when the reflection is completed. So there is no phase inversion, as you can see. It is the same pulse, the same phase with the same shape, but just traveling in the opposite direction. So here you can see that the energy is a combination of kinetic plus potential energy. Here also it is a combination of kinetic energy plus potential energy. But by the time it comes here, it has become pure potential energy. Kinetic energy has become zero for a moment. And then again, it is converting to kinetic plus potential.
Less potential.
So the action of this boundary is just the reverse of the rigid boundary because this does not apply any reactionary force. So the displacement goes unaffected. Okay, so there is no internal conservative elastic force. So there is no conversion of kinetic to potential energy that is happening. Rather, no conversion of potential to kinetic that is happening. Because in this phase, the first phase of the impact, as the displacement of the point P is going up to its maximum value, there is no reaction force from the point P. So kinetic is just converting to potential to more potential and to more potential till the potential energy reaches the maximum possible value and then again reconverts to kinetic.
So the final amplitude is E naught, right?
The final,
Amplitude.
yeah, E naught. Okay, so now we will see that this reflection in the fifth diagram also, it's a combination of kinetic and potential. You can see that it's actually in the fifth diagram, it's come back more or less to the original shape only. Okay, so you can see that here, as this wave travels like this, in the next instant, these particles are all going up and these are coming down. Plus the string is got deformity in its shape. Okay, so it's got a combination of kinetic and potential energy, but it's only in this diagram that you can see that the medium particles are at rest. Okay. All particles are at their maximum of displacement. So therefore, del y by del t is 0. At the local maxima, the derivative is 0. So that's how the kinetic energy has become 0. But here also you can see the next diagram. This is going something like this. So the particles are moving, so they have kinetic energy. Here the next diagram is going to go like this. So the particles have kinetic energy. Okay, so hope this aspect is clear to all of you. This will become important again when we look at
Just a second, sir.
waves later. Yes, sorry.
Sir, the last statement.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So remember both these cases. Okay, they are exact opposite of each other, and that's about standing waves or stationary waves, which comes from superposition of a certain type. So anyway, so that will bring us to superposition of waves very soon. But before that, I want to have all the basics covered with an example. Going back to harmonic waves. Okay, so going back to the example of harmonic waves. So this is going to infinity. This is a stretched string which has a tension of 100 newtons and a linear mass density of 0.4 grams per centimeter. Now attached to x equal to 0 is a simple harmonic oscillator. So at x equal to 0, a simple harmonic oscillator is attached of frequency 20 hertz, such that the particle at x equal to 0 has a displacement of 0, that is at mean position at t equal to 0, and particle velocity of plus 0.2 centimeters per second. So first of all, find frequency, wavelength, wave speed, omega, and k for the traveling harmonic wave. Find the amplitude of the wave and write its equation. draw the snapshot picture of y versus t, sorry, y versus x at t equal to 0 and t equal to 1/80th of a second. That is the same thing as
Frequency.
12.5 milliseconds. Okay. And final part, find the particle velocity and particle acceleration at the point x equal to 2 centimeters at t equal to 25 milliseconds. Okay, so okay, and one more thing, we'll also calculate the power transmitted by the wave. Calculate the power transmitted. So this will cover all the properties of wave and the formation of the general equation and all that. Things which are very necessary looking ahead at superposition of waves, which will be coming up as the next section of wave mechanics for us. So just try this out. You can, if you like, refer to your notes and go through all the formulae and general concepts that we've discussed for one-dimensional harmonic waves before this. Just change this value from 2.5 to 1.25 centimeters. I mean, from 2 centimeters to 1.25. Okay, so students, let's look at this question in detail. So the first aspect we'll understand is that the sine wave, as it propagates, the propagation speed will be square root of t by mu. So that is square root of 100 newtons divided by 0.4 into 10 raised power minus 1 that you convert to kg per meter. So you will see that this will become 50 meters per second. Okay. So the propagation speed is 50 meters per second, whereas the frequency of the wave is 20 hertz. So the wavelength will become 2.5 meters. Is omega, okay. And accordingly, you can see that omega will become 40 pi radians per second, and k will become 2 pi by lambda, or you can say like this. Okay. So you've got frequency, wavelength, wave speed, omega, and k. Okay. Now, as far as the amplitude is concerned, so what we can see is that the wave equation. So now let's understand this in detail. The wave equation is, suppose y equal to a sine omega t minus kx plus phi, let's say, where omega we saw is 40 pi radians per second because the frequency was 20 hertz, right? K was 4 pi by 5 radians per meter because the wavelength had come out to be 2.5 meters. The wave speed we saw is 50 meters per second. Okay, now given this information that y at x equal to 0, t equal to 0 is 0, and particle velocity del y by del t at x equal to 0, t equal to 0, that is equal to was plus 0.2 plus 0.2 centimeters per second. So we will use this information. So from this equation, we can see also that particle velocity in general is E omega cos omega t minus kx plus phi. So when we substitute this information above, we can see that y at x equal to 0, t equal to 0 is A sine phi, and that is 0. And when we substitute this information, del y by del t, or the particle velocity at the origin, at the initial time, is, according to the above equation, A omega cos phi, and that is equal to plus 0.2 centimeters per second. So from this now we can see that sine phi is 0, whereas cos phi is positive, which means that phi is pi by 2, which also means that A omega is plus 0.2 centimeters per second. And remember that omega was 40 radians per second. So 40 pi radians per second.
Sir, how will phi be pi by 2?
Because cos phi is positive, no?
So, but
And sin
sin
phi
pi
is,
by 2 is not 0.
sorry, phi is 0. My mistake. Okay, so phi is 0. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So sin phi is 0 and cos phi is positive. That means phi is 0. Okay, because cos phi is 1. So that means you can see A omega is plus 0.2 centimeters per second. Now, because your cos phi is plus 1. Right. So that gives you the value of amplitude. In fact, this amplitude is, you can say, we can reduce this to 1 upon 2 pi, right, into 10 raised power minus 2 centimeters. So it's a very small amplitude. So now we've got the amplitude also and we've got the phase constant also. So we can see that the general equation of the wave is A sine omega t minus kx. The phase constant is 0. Where we know all these terms, the amplitude, the angular frequency, the k and all this thing. So rest of the things I'm sure you'll be able to do, like the snapshot picture, etc. Once you got the wave equation, you'll figure out how to work that out.
Yes.
So can you please scroll up and show the starting of the question?
Yeah. Okay, so let's come down to this part. So the snapshot at t equal to 0 and then at t equal to 2.5 milliseconds, I think it was, yes. Sorry, 1.25 milliseconds. So half of that. So at t equal to 0, the snapshot picture is a sine minus kx, which is minus a sine kx. So the string will look like this, This is the shape of the string at equal to 0. And the wave is traveling in this direction. So you can see that the particle velocity at the origin is upwards as expected. Having a particle velocity which is upwards because the wave is shifting in this direction. With a wave speed of 50 meters per second, and it is having a wavelength of 2.5 meters. That is, it's having a time period of 1/20th of a second or 50 milliseconds. And also an amplitude, we saw quite a small amplitude. Now, next if we see the time as 1.25 milliseconds, you can see the value of omega t will become 40 pi into 1.25 by 1000. Right, it was 12.5 milliseconds. That changes this.
Sir, 1/80 will accept the diagram.
Yeah, 12.5 milliseconds or 180 seconds. You see this omega t term will become pi by 2. So pi at t equal to 12.5 milliseconds will become a sine pi by 2 minus kx. Okay, so that will become the a cos kx. So you can see that actually because the time we have selected is quarter of a time period. So the wave has also shifted quarter of a wavelength during that time. This is the snapshot picture image at t equal to 12.5 milliseconds, which is quarter of a time period. So you can see that the wave has traveled 1/4 of a wavelength. Yeah, so those are the particle velocity, sorry, the snapshot pictures. Okay. Now the next thing is we wanted to calculate particle velocity and particle acceleration at the point x equal to 1.25 meters. at the instant t equal to 12.5 milliseconds. Okay. So from this general equation, we can see that the particle velocity is a omega cos omega t minus kx. So now the particle velocity at the particular position and particular instant become like this. For this value kx, we saw that k's value was 4 pi by 5. It become pi, and omega t this we just saw is pi by 2. So the particle velocity will become a omega cos of pi plus pi by 2 or pi minus pi by 2, whatever. So that will become 0. Whereas the particle acceleration comes from differentiation of this is minus a omega square sine omega t minus kx. So the particle acceleration at x equal to 1.25 meters, time equal to 12.5 milliseconds, that becomes minus a omega square sine of pi by 2 minus pi. That will actually become plus a omega square. So that will be plus of in centimeters multiplied by 40 pi squared in radians per second whole square. So this is in centimeters per second square. Then later converted to meters per second square also. This is the general method of dealing with these type of situations.
Sir, can you show the question once?
Yes.
Sir, in the fourth part, T, we have to take 25 millisecond, right?
Yes, 25 minutes. Okay, right. So,
Sir, you've taken 12.5, I think.
right. So at 25 milliseconds, this will become, okay, so let's look at this as another part of the question. Okay, so suppose we change it to x equal to 12.5 meters and t equal to 25 milliseconds. So at this time, our omega t will actually become pi, and our kx is also equal to pi. So for this set of values now, our del y by del t will become a omega. This will actually become a omega cos of 0. So instead, this will become plus a omega, and our particle acceleration you will see will become 0. So you can just think of this like another part. If we were looking at these two values at 12.5 milliseconds, then they would have been as shown here. And if we are looking at 12.5 milliseconds, sorry, at 25 milliseconds, then they become these values. Graph Shikhar has come from the substitution of the value of time. See, we had got the general equation. Once we got the value of the amplitude, we got the value of omega, and we got the value of k. And more importantly, we got the value of phase constant. So we saw that the general equation was A sine omega t minus kx. Okay. Where more importantly, the value of omega was 40 pi radians per second. Now, so from this, when we want the snapshot at a particular time, we have to substitute that value of time. So you want the snapshot
Yes, sir.
at t equal to 0, for example, we wanted the snapshot. So y as a function of x at t equal to 0 became a sine minus kx. Now, as you know, sine is an odd function. So sine of minus theta is minus sine theta. So it became the minus a sine kx graph. Okay. So the minus a sine kx graph looks like this. It's like just take a minus sine theta graph and multiply it with a factor of a. So instead of varying between +1 and -1, it varies between plus a and minus a. And this here is lambda. This is lambda by 4. This is lambda by 2, where of course we had seen that k was 4 pi by 5 in radians per meter. So lambda was equal to 2.5 meters. So this is clear now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now similarly, when we look at the snapshot picture at t equal to whatever time, like in this case, we had taken, let's say, 12.5 milliseconds. So at that time, y's value as a function of x would have become like this. It would have become a sine omega. Now, omega is 40 pi into this time, which is 12.5 milliseconds. So that's okay, minus kx. So when we work this out, we saw that it comes out to be pi by 2 this term. So it's sine pi by 2 minus kx. Then again, you are using the trigonometric identity that sine pi by 2 minus theta is cos theta. So this became the a cos theta graph, and theta is kx. So accordingly, that looks like this. So you understood that the wave is shifted like this.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's how we got the snapshots. So hope this is clear.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that now puts us in a good situation to start understanding the next part of wave mechanics, which is going to be superposition of waves. So superposition means basically overlap. Yeah, Jagannath, I'll scroll up. Okay. So this section also, we will study to a couple of different cases of superposition of waves. The first case is what we call interference of waves. It's a very specific kind of superposition. So interference is a phenomena whereby such that multiple waves, that is two or more, traveling in the same direction and of identical frequencies overlap or superimpose, then the resulting phenomena that occurs, that is called interference. So we'll come back to this. Just this was the section you wanted to note down, Jagannath. Okay. So So this part then,
Done, sir.
hmm. Okay, so what we'll see is that mathematically, if we have this kind of a situation that we have one wave, it's represented by this equation a1 sine omega t minus kx, suppose, and another wave represented by this equation. Both have common frequency, therefore they will have the common angular frequency. For both waves. Now V is equal to omega by k, so therefore k will also be common for both waves because they are propagating in the same medium. So V is square root of t by mu is same for both. So as long as the frequency is the same for both, the wavelength is also the same for the both. Okay, so therefore, but they can have some phase difference where phi is the phase difference between them. And A1 and A2 are the separate amplitudes. So the superposition of two such waves will result in interference. The resultant wave that we get will be given by summing up these two kind of terms. Now this is going to be something exactly like we had done in SHM. But there is just additional term of kx, which was not there in SHM. So the same kind of treatment will be done here. And we will be able to see that we will get some net amplitude into sine omega t minus kx plus some net phase constant, let's say epsilon, where the algebra will result in a very similar formula, and finally that formula can be described by a phasor diagram like we've done in combination of SHMs. That same process will have to be repeated here to show that the net amplitude is given by this kind of formula which fits into a phasor diagram situation. Very much like a vector addition, even though this is not in fact the addition of vectors. So this is the corresponding formula of the phasor addition. So we will discuss this once more in detail, but the thing is, it's already familiar to you from SHM combinations, which you've seen in the last chapter. So as of now, you can relate it with that. So this is the complete situation that occurs when two waves interfere. Remember, for interference to occur, the necessary condition is that the waves should be having identical frequency and they should be traveling in the same direction. It's not necessary that they should have same amplitudes, which is why we've taken A1 and A2 as different values. And of course, they can have a phase difference where the term phi is coming. But because their frequencies are same, so omega is common for both of them. And because they are propagating through the same medium, so the wave speed is same. So once your omega is common, so is the value of the angular wave number k, or the wavelength lambda. Okay, people, so with that, we conclude today's session. Next lecture, we will pick up the numerical examples of interference of waves, and we will also take a look at the derivation of that formula once again for the net amplitude. Though, as I said, it is basically the same thing as the combination of SHMs that you've seen in the previous lecture. I mean, in the previous chapter. So you can do a recap of that yourself. Okay, we'll concentrate more on the numerical applications of that. So that's it for today, people. Wish you all the best. Thanks for attending and have a nice day.
Bye, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Bye, sir.
Uh, yeah. Jagannath, to answer your question, it would still show interference because at a given point of time, the two waves are going through the same string. There might be two strings which you have knotted up together, so the waves pass from one string to another. But while they are superimposing or while they are overlapping at a given point, they are going through one common string, both the waves. So they will still have the same wavelength. because they have the same frequency. The only case where they will not show interference is if they are coming from sources which are at different frequencies. Hope that point is clear. Okay. So once we see more numerical examples, this will become more clear. Okay. So yeah, that's it for today, people. Wish you the best.
Thank you, sir. Bye.